Hey everyone, welcome back to the 443 Security Simplified podcast. I'm your host today, Corey Nachreiner, and joining me today is Kristen Yang, a lead in our SOC for WatchGuard's Managed Detection and Response, or MDR service, who we will introduce in more depth during today's episode. It's a pleasure to have you, Kristen.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for inviting me over.
Of course, thanks again for joining us. So as you can tell, today's episode is a bit special and different. Today, we have the pleasure to talk to an experienced Security Operations Center analyst and red teamer professional who has seen and helped detect and remediate many security incidents for many organizations. So during this episode, we'll learn what that entails. We'll learn what the most common threats she has seen and that you should all look out for. And of course, we'll talk about defensive and protection strategies that can keep you safe. So with that, let's jump right in. And Kristen, I'm sorry, you're new to the episode.
Yeah.
We always like to start with a default question, which is, what is your hacker's origin story? And just so you know, back in my day, hacker wasn't automatically a cyber criminal. Hacker was actually an honorific for someone that thought outside the box and ultimately eventually learned how to exploit software. But because of that, they're also good at catching it too. So it's not meant as a bad thing, but
Yeah.
what got you into security today?
Yeah. So my journey into cybersecurity didn't start off in cybersecurity, actually. I did work in help desk for about 10 years. That actually gave me the technical background I needed to then get into cybersecurity. So it was really good that I started off in help desk. And then during that time, at my previous employment, I was then promoted to a security analyst because there was a information security department that was spinning up, and they needed someone to help fill that role and help build a program. So yeah, I was promoted and hired as to do that. During that time, I started learning about ethical hacking and also became curious about how hackers got into a corporate environment in ways that they did. So then I ended up pursuing the certified ethical hacker certification, which I eventually got.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a pretty hands-on one too, where you have
Yeah.
to use pen test tools during it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So then after that, I worked there for 3 years and eventually left to join Act Zero, which is now part of WatchGuard. And during my time at WatchGuard as a SOC analyst, throughout the time, I suddenly then got more engaged with offensive security tactics and red teaming stuff because I got really more interested in the offensive side of things. So I started
Cool.
doing a lot more training on that front, and then just started delving into some red team exercises just recently, and that's where I'm at.
Awesome, awesome. I actually think it's all interesting how people get into security. Sometimes you have nerds or little geeks like me that were kind of interested in learning how to explore on the internet and came into it immediately. But I actually think it's good for the folks that come up through it organically through technology and networking. Like we're often asked, how can we get in the field? What certification should we get? And for instance, your CEH is great, but my first comment is you should learn deep networking and or deep coding first, because everything in security is based off, not everything, but a lot of the actual technical security is based off having an understanding of how networking works,
Yep.
how operating systems work,
Yeah.
and in some cases for vulnerabilities, how coding works. So I think it's amazing that you came up through the IT field. Now,
Yeah.
moving on today, you mentioned you kind of transitioned to the offensive side, and today for us, your title, you're a threat emulation and investigation lead, as I
Mhm.
mentioned, for our SOC team, specifically not the corporate SOC, but the SOC we use to manage the security, manage detection and response for our customers. So
Yeah.
on a day to day, what does that threat emulation investigation lead role look like?
So yeah, good question. So part of my role is on the SOC side, I am the lead investigator, tech lead, in terms of helping my team with directing the flow of what an investigation should go towards in terms of investigating certain alerts or there's a major incident. I serve as the lead for that, and yeah, directing the team as needed. And then during the other free time, I do research the latest threats that are out there, the latest latest threats, building threat profiles, developing IOCs, and then using those to build tabletop exercises to help improve the SOC's knowledge of what's going on out there and keep them up to date on the latest threats. And then also help
Awesome.
improve some of the alerting structures that we have and improving our detections. So
That's very cool. And I feel like I think the reason security people, the good guys, so to speak, the good people, want to go in the offensive side is by learning how to do the dark arts, you really get a good understanding. Like first, it's a cat and mouse game. Bad guys are
it is.
always
Yeah,
updating their technique, so they're
yeah,
trying to hide from us. So you have to keep, appraised with what is going on, and
yeah,
maybe even be an outside the box puzzle solver yourself to help figure out how they're hiding from us. But two, I imagine that the reason you're investigative lead is you can more quickly than someone that doesn't have the offensive skills figure out based on different indicators if something's bad or not.
yeah. Exactly. It gives me that different perspective. Yeah.
Awesome. So before this, you were like a typical threat hunter and maybe a typical SOC analyst. What was
Yep.
that role? How did that different and what led, well, you kind of gave us a bit of it, but how did you convert from that role to this one?
So yeah, I started off as a SOC analyst when I joined Zero. I was like right now the frontline analyst, people who are doing the initial triage and response of alerts that come in, monitoring threats, and introduced me to really the whole field of managed detection and response, which I've never heard about honestly when before I joined Zero. So that was brand new to me. But then throughout that time, I started to become curious about how attackers are leaving their footprints in on our environments. Just how are they doing that? So just then I just because of that, I just got more curious and just eventually pivoted over to the offensive side of things because I just wanted to learn how they got in. So with all this different raw telemetry, I didn't know how to understand that at first. So I'm like, you know what? I want to learn how to do it. So
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I agree. It's the fun stuff when you get into cybersecurity. I'm now, as Mark jokes all the time, now that I'm a CISO role, I have to do all the political people management stuff, even though I came up playing with Metasploit and Burp Suite myself. So
yeah.
everyone else gets to do the cool stuff now. So it is fun, even though at the end of the day we don't want attackers to be successful. It's great to understand. I will say one thing, not planned, but I do want to unpack. You mentioned you hadn't heard of what MDR was before you became part of MDR service. And I think a lot of the listeners here, you're probably out there as partners or MSPs, so maybe you know it, and maybe smaller businesses know it more, but just for those listening, like obviously every company needs some way to do monitoring. Like we believe in this day and age, besides having preventative security controls, like having a firewall like a WatchGuard firewall or having endpoint protection like WatchGuard EPDR, uh, is good. You can't prevent everything. And there's products that like EDR that start to detect living off the land attacks. And there's other there's lots of indicators that are not for sure. We know this is malware when we can block it, but lots of indicators that add up to potentially an attack is happening. So a typical business, when we say SOC, that's a security operations center, basically you're trying to bring in all the telemetry from the security controls you have, all the telemetry from the identity and network security controls you have, and literally find the stuff that the preventative stuff is missing. But I think the reason MDR exists is that costs money, right? Like people buy firewalls and endpoint, but to buy a SIM, something called a security incident event management system, to have smart folks like Kristen Yang and even basic CSIRT computer response incident response team handlers, if you're a business of 50 people, you probably have an IT guy who's wearing a security hat. You're not going to have a CISO. So at the end of the day, just for the folks listening, MDR is a service specifically made to help our managed service providers deliver the same type of SOC experience you would build at an enterprise to the smallest company, because we know, it's a big capital expenditure to do it yourself. So we're trying to give you that same 24/7 detection with threat hunters and people who can see these indicators and find additional threats for a price that SMBs need. So that was more for the listeners. So I kind of asked what the difference was between a SOC analyst role, an investigation lead, and a threat hunter. I think I'm going to ask even more details later, but as soon as we hear threat hunting, I mean, people want to know, what are you finding? So what do you think, uh, based on your threat hunting during that phase? We'll get in more depths later, but at a high level, what is something MSPs should be looking into their environment, or end user customers should be looking in their environment? That's just common things you see all the time.
Well, in terms of threat hunting, I think the most important ones to look for would be indicators of initial access. So basically, there are signs that someone unauthorized is trying to get into your environment, because a lot of attacks can be prevented if that was caught in the beginning. Um, so stuff like brute force attacks on on-prem Active Directory or cloud accounts like Office 365. Yeah, brute force attacks such as that. Weak credentials. That's a really common way of someone trying to get in. Also, I've seen a lot of people downloading third-party software websites that that are just suspicious and you
I've
can
seen that too. Yeah,
yeah
if you don't
downloading
if you don't
yeah
have control, like a lot of people don't
yeah
enforce whitelisting only. They give people local admin on their
yeah
laptop,
yeah
and they empower their users to install anything. So maybe they Google something to rip video, and it turns out that that also has malware or Trojan baked
yeah
in. So that's very common.
yeah yeah so I've seen a lot of that. Yeah, giving users local admin rights is a really big no,
Yeah.
but a lot of people do that just for efficiency purposes, which I
I would have to
understand.
say I feel like like us security folks would love to see people not have admin, the local admin, and be able to install anything.
Yeah,
And we'd love to even see white app like hardened white app listing, meaning literally only letting applications you want to run and
yeah,
block every other executable. But it is a little harder to maintain, so not a
yeah,
lot of SMBs do it. One other thing I picked up there is you talked about initial access. I think security nerds, at least for me, I geek out about the really sophisticated and cool attacks that don't require end user or user interaction. Like think like a 0-day vulnerability in a software application, and then a really fancy privilege escalation based on a vulnerability
yeah,
where it's not just a user identity. But on the flip side, if you're talking about what's seen most commonly, there's a common saying that hackers log in, they don't hack in, meaning it seems like most attacks start with them somehow just getting a legitimate privileged credential.
yeah.
As we're talking about common thing, is that true? Based on what you see, should I be more worried about all this sophisticated nation state 0-day, or just making sure I protect my identities?
So, one very common vector of attackers, finding ways to get in are IoT, Internet of Things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's a big one. So especially with some of the ones that I can recall, like the infamous proxy shell attack, which against Microsoft Exchange, basically, and if any exposed Microsoft Exchange server that's running a vulnerable version, that exploit's publicly available.
Yeah.
Anyone can just download that exploit and just run it.
Or I think of the Mirai
Or the
botnet that
button,
was
yeah,
looking for things like
yeah,
essentially they're looking for Linux devices that weren't hardened, and pretty much whether it's a business or consumer IoT device, say it's a webcam, say it's a consumer level router, when you get the really cheap webcams from different Southeast Asia, places, they run Linux. They work great as webcams, but they have spent no time hardening. And Mirai, at the end of the day, targeted basic Linux, weaknesses, not even vulnerabilities. and like you say, pop all your webcams. They
Yeah.
also make, if I'm in a threat actor, what a lovely bastion host to have, because you don't suspect your
Yeah.
smart TV or your
Yeah.
webcam.
Yeah.
But it's a full Linux computer. I can scan your network. I can run scripts. I can do all my lateral movement from that little webcam that some people may not realize is really just a full blown computer.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there, you've given us common ones, we'll talk about more, but is there like a really horrible war story from the cyber trenches that keeps you up at night as far as worrying about it happening to your customers or to us?
Not currently, but I do, now that you mention it, I do remember when WannaCry hit back in
Oh
2016.
yeah.
That was a big one, and at that time, at my previous employment, WannaCry was a big thing. So like our entire teams were like just going about which like patching all of our servers. I had SMB version 1 because that was huge.
Yeah.
So that was one that kept
It
me up.
reminds me of how bad worms can be.
Yeah,
Like at that point, when WannaCry came out, ransomware had started taking off with CryptoLocker, and it proved that ransomware really could lock up computers. But we hadn't seen self-propagating worms as often. Like the security industry had gotten better with the network security controls that, for the most part, tried to block how worms might propagate, at least both internally or over the external internet if you find the right network vulnerability. But to your point, SMB shared that took ransomware from people just infecting one computer at a time and asking for $300 in cryptocurrency to a
yeah,
grandma, to a SMB flaw, server message. It's basically it's what it's the net it's what Windows uses to do file sharing. I
yeah,
forget the acronym for SMB. But basically that allowed the ransomware to infect every computer in a Windows network that wasn't updated in the right way.
yeah,
You definitely don't want to use SMB v1 anymore. So yeah, that's a great one. And the fact that it showed us how widespread it could go, where not only it started targeting if I remember right, that was we suspect, it's alleged that is the nation state of North Korea,
yeah.
which was
Suspected. Yeah,
also unusual because you expect criminal cyber attackers to be looking for money. But North Korea, because of its sanctions, I believe, is one of the few nation states that is actually not just hacking for espionage, but is hacking to steal money. But I remember it showing up in train stations. Like a German train station had the WannaCry ransom note on its scheduling thing just because it happened to be a Windows.
wow.
So they were targeting hospitals with it specifically, but the wormness of it made it escape its bounds. So
Yeah,
yeah, that was a big one.
that was a big one.
Worms do scare me. We're getting better at fixing the network vulnerability mechanisms that allow worms to automatically propagate versus just a single malware, but scary for sure.
Yeah,
Speaking of this, do you think in general, obviously, we've talked about a few nation states who are known for being APT threat actors. So APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, but it really means a more sophisticated threat actor that uses a lot of evasion and the advanced techniques to not get caught. Do you think the average threat actor, including cyber criminals, is getting more sophisticated, or are they just more efficiently exploiting the same old weakness because we haven't fixed them, or a mix of both?
honestly, from what I've seen, it's a mix of both because we still got organizations that are using legacy software, legacy operating
Yeah,
systems, those vulnerabilities and printers. They're still there. There's still opportunity to attack, especially if they're exposed to the internet. That's prime estate right there.
I agree.
Also, with the rising of artificial intelligence being more common among many workforces nowadays, and many companies using AI to do automation stuff, the attack surface just got pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, with AI being
I
brand
feel
new,
like AI's biggest thing to the
yeah,
threat actor is it's lowering the bar. It's allowing dumb script kiddies to
yeah,
become more sophisticated.
yeah,
Like back in the day, to exploit like say you are exploiting the 0 day, to be a reverser that actually knows assembly and can reverse a program, let alone find a deep vulnerability in the program and make it exploitable, you need some smarts for that.
yeah,
Now AI can literally do that for you
yeah,
sometimes in seconds.
yeah,
So
and
AI, whether or not the threat actor is sophisticated, I feel like it's going to lower the bar and make even the average threat actor have more sophisticated techniques.
Yep. Yeah, that's what it's becoming now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does suck that we still have all those weaknesses out there. I do like that you mentioned IoT though, because I feel like in the business world, we call it more OT, operational technology, but it's the same thing. It's equipment that uses a computer inside it that's connected to a network. So like in healthcare, a MRI machine, or in a bank, a ATM machine, really just a computer. And guess what? Until recently, 90% of them were Windows CE.
No.
It's not only is it a Windows operating system, but CE is the old, Palm Pilot so to your point, I feel like even people that are trying to do the right thing as far as updating traditional computers, patching my laptops, patching my servers and workstations, it's so easy to have all this legacy, sometimes end of life stuff in the OT or IoT equipment you have out there because and hopefully most administrators know those are computers that need firmware updates too. But in the past, if it didn't look like a computer, you didn't treat it like one. Cool. Besides that, any other before we move on to other things, any other general attack trends or patterns that really stand out lately, maybe in the last year or so?
Yeah, again, I mentioned AI. Many companies are adopting AI tools, and with that comes a new set of vulnerabilities that are just surfacing as more security researchers delve into it more. And there's going to be that's going to probably be the new thing for a while. Also, with the recent supply chain infrastructure attack with Notepad++, um, that's also a huge trend that's going on.
Dive into that one a little bit more. If I remember right, Notepad is something that comes with Windows, but if you're like a scripter or a coder, Notepad++ is something you can download
Yeah,
for free, essentially, that
yeah,
has it will highlight and show you code better. So a lot of people prefer it. But if I
right.
remember right, that was a supply chain Trojanization of it. Why don't you go into that a little? I
Yeah.
think we talked about it on the podcast, but I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, so basically, from what I recall, the update server which was used to roll out the updates was compromised,
Yeah.
and that server was taken over to deploy malicious versions of Notepad++.
Yep.
From what I recall, I mean, I
I
might,
think that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
I think that
Yeah.
that's what that was, and then they updated no, they updated this, they since updated it so now that you can't do that
And
anymore.
it's similar to a lot of other things that this audience might know, like SolarWinds is
Yeah,
Orion situation, where SolarWinds, an organization that makes very popular monitoring software for networking, got compromised at a corporate level, but so far into their software development networks that they were able to literally add malware to the real installer and have it perfectly signed like it was a normal update. The one I remember before that was, do you remember the C Cleaner one? C Cleaner is a really popular or it used to be anyways, Windows app that would like clean your registry from bloat and just do basic stuff. A lot of I don't think it was used in business a lot, but a lot of Windows users that didn't like registry bloat would use it.
yeah.
But Perforce at the time, a different company owns it now, but they had a corporate breach and they got into the development network. So I guess really kind of the pattern is watch out for digital or software supply chain attacks.
Yep.
Cool. Uh, for organizations, I guess I kind of I talked a little bit about what a security operations center is, and the whole reason we have MDR services is small companies tend not to be able to have a full SOC, and they often have to outsource it. But for those who haven't really managed or had a SOC or been in one, can you kind of explain how a SOC team, a security operations center team, handles any incident from finding it to how they react and do all the other steps?
Yeah. So basically, the SOC team handles an incident from the initial triage to the response to the customer. So the initial triage is done by our frontline analysts. They get an alert, they review it, and then after some initial investigation is done, they send an initial response out to the customer with their findings. And then if there is a sign that a major incident has occurred, that's declared, and then another process just kicks in to do the major incident process. So that's another monster in itself, because it includes containment, remediation, and recovery. But that sort of thing can also happen during like a regular security alert. That's some odd thing happens on a host, and we just do the containment, and then just follow through with the customer, and then the customer would then take the steps to remediate said.
Remediate and
Yeah.
contain. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
But you've provided them kind of a playbook to
yeah,
do that based
yeah,
on the, yeah.
yeah, pretty much. So
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If I were to dumb it down a little bit more, like obviously there's types of things that our products do that are completely preventative. Like if you get a malware detection that we blocked, that's not a SOC incident because we've already blocked it. But what you're really saying is we're gathering a lot of other telemetry through our products and maybe other devices or products too that are indicators of suspicion. So really what you're doing is first, how do you get an alert? One of the magic sauces I think we have with why we acquired Act Zero to build our SOC upon is how you take all these little indicators. Like an indicator of an attack can be, oh, I just found a program running that is not a Microsoft program, but it's using a Microsoft, or maybe the opposite, that's not using a known, maybe I find a kernel driver running that's not using a known digital certificate for kernel drivers. It's not signed properly.
yeah,
That could be a very bad indicator, but alone it's not enough. Maybe you need other indicators. So basically what our SOC is doing is gathering all that telemetry, I think. And one of our magic things is normally a threat hunter would have to go through every, let's call them not really like warnings, indicators, and do the correlation. But we have a lot of AI modeling that's taking all that noise and
yeah,
only bringing your team the alerts that
yeah,
we really have some confidence to look into.
yeah,
So when you say you get an alert, by then we've gotten maybe not 100% confidence, but this is something the team has to look into. So
yeah,
you guys do look into it, you confirm it, and that's when you start to then follow, okay, if this looks like an incident, what everything did it touch?
yeah,
How, and that's part of your containment and remediation plan. And then you deliver all that data for the folks that we're giving this service to outsource.
yeah,
One of the things that, like, if I were running a SOC, a lot of people talk about prevention, detection, and response, which
yeah,
is basically what I just talked about. But they talk about it linearly. It really is a loop. Once you've done all of these steps and the customer is remediated and contained, what you should be doing is you've also identified a root cause. You've identified things that
yeah,
might have made it laterally move easier.
yeah,
You have all of these learnings, and really, that should circle back to prevention, meaning then the customer should, if possible, if you learn something new, make changes, add new security things. How, as someone that is in MDR, where we're giving them playbooks and managing
yeah.
responses, is there anything we do to help them take their learnings and put it back into their security defense after to do the circle back to prevention?
Yeah, so especially during major incidents, that's when it really comes to that's when it really exposes all the misconfigurations and vulnerabilities a customer has. Yeah, it's unfortunately it's not until a major incident has occurred that it really shines light onto those things. So during that time, when we go through our major incident process, like you mentioned, the prevention, detection, and the response, and then um, calling our key stakeholders to get involved, and all the people who with the different skills needed to help solve this case. Yeah, building a root cause analysis at the end, gathering all that data, all that information into one readable report.
One report for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a report for them to help identify what were the lessons learned. How did this attacker get in? Here are the indicators that we found. Here are the vulnerabilities that we found. Here are the endpoints which aren't being monitored. Here are some of the things where we don't have available logging for, and that's why we missed it. A lot of these things get identified in the root cause analysis, and that the RCA
Cool.
really is important when it comes to fixing someone's environment and fixing up those vulnerabilities. So it's really important that
Awesome.
that's done. So
Yeah, so that analysis, that root cause analysis in the final report really is a huge value that a customer can use to help them fix. By the way, there's a scenario to give an idea of if you're finding vulnerabilities in a lot of things, it could be lots of takeaways, but how often is it just a basic weakness? And let me give you a specific example that the endpoint team has talked about before that I wonder if you see from a SOC level where we have great products. EPDR not only is preventative of a ton of ransomware, but it actually has a lot of automated EDR that
yeah,
can be preventative even post execution. Can even when things aren't blocked or known right away, can stop it while it's doing stuff. So we find that if people have our product on, for instance, they get ransomware very rarely. But what happens is we sometimes find a customer that has had ransomware on a thing. We've detected it because another device detected ransomware trying to come to it. And it turns out the root cause is, oh, I had EPDR installed on a ton of computers and workstations, but I didn't put it on my server that's in this one place that I didn't really have a network map of, and that server got infected. Is that
yeah.
common in the SOC?
Yeah, it's very, very, very common. That's like unfortunately one of the ways that how organizations get attacked is because if they have like an EDR rolled out, yeah, that's great and all, but if you don't have everything,
Yeah.
every asset deployed with it, and someone manages to find that loophole and get in, then
Yeah.
you're gonna have a hard
This
time
is where,
finding.
by the way, my
Yeah,
job, when I talk about how a CISO doesn't get to do the fun technical stuff, it does point out why basic blocking and tackling, asset inventory, like having a basic asset inventory that's continuously updated and accurate, meaning it should be automated discovering those assets. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but I think the average person would be surprised at how few people have a
yeah,
network map. How people, like, most of them have old school network maps that are not digital ones that are scanning networks and keeping them continuous. They're just a network map someone tried to make 10 years ago, okay, maybe 1 year ago, but did it as a vector diagram, and a day later someone brought a new device and it's not accurate. But I don't care how great your security products are. WatchGuard makes great ones. I want you to have them. They will protect you if you aren't doing basic asset inventory right so that you really know what your products are, and you miss putting security on one of the devices, half the time it's not it's not the security product or the technology that failed. It's the fact that you haven't configured it properly, including not installing it. So just find that interesting. But let's pivot because you got more interested in the offensive side of things. And now in your latest role, that threat emulation part is basically a form of red teaming, which I'm sure our audience knows is pretending to be an attacker and trying to break in.
yeah,
Usually, when there's a blue team, usually it's to help train, like you're not doing it as a real attacker. You're trying to help the company find
yeah,
weaknesses
yeah.
or help a defensive blue team to ensure they have the right visibility to catch this type of stuff. So, what types of things have you learned to improve a customer's detection and response based on that?
So as a red teamer,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, as a red team or a threat emulation person.
yeah. So after having being in a as a red team sort of mind, understanding how the kill chain works, using really popular frameworks like MITRE and Lockheed Martin. Those frameworks really help break down how an attack kill chain would look like. So there are different phases of an attack, from initial access, credential dumping, defense evasion, privilege escalation. There's a few more. So understanding what each phase is in terms of the actual indicators that I see in our telemetry really helps then identify what areas that a blue team needs to focus in more of, and to act, and then also understand like how does the telemetry look like during that sort of phase. So that helps me as a red team to be able to organize that and being able to then tailor more
So in
training.
other words, we can find a specific weaknesses in their particular, like just to give you, you mentioned the Lockheed Martin cybersecurity kill chain, which I think there's 7 or 8, but it essentially is reconnaissance, which is all about learning about an attack.
Yeah,
A phase where based on what you learn as an attacker, you figure out a weak spot where you have to kind of weaponize and
yeah,
develop a vulnerability. There's a period where you then exploit that vulnerability. Then presumably it was successful, but with maybe guest privileges on one computer. So then there's a lateral movement pivoting phase. And eventually, I might be missing a few steps, but it gets to the actual thing the attacker wants to do, whether it's
yeah,
exfiltration of data.
yeah,
Another way to look at this, we may not dive deep into it, but I know you're familiar with the MITRE ATT&CK chain, which is really, while they might have different phases, at a high level, it has those same kill chain top level phases, but it goes into very technical depths about different techniques you can use in each
yeah,
phase.
yeah,
So it sounds to me like you're describing, by you knowing that, by you understanding that kill chain and the MITRE ATT&CK defense, when you're red teaming, you're not only seeing their weaknesses in each of those phases and each of those attack techniques, but maybe you can find a highlight that, oh, the preventative stuff was okay. I might have found one hole, but in lateral movement, you had a really crunchy exterior shell that it took me a while to get through. But once I got inside, it was soft and chewy in the middle, and I could do anything I wanted. So you really
yeah,
have to work on the
yeah,
lateral pivoting movement part of the kill chain.
yeah,
Is that kind of accurate of what of rewording what you said, or
yeah, 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 pretty much. Yeah.
cool? So that's what you've kind of have learned as a red teamer. What do blue teams consistently underestimate about attackers?
So there are a few things. So for one, especially with nation state actors, they have all the time and the resources given to them to help do months or weeks of reconnaissance against a target. They to collect all the information they can about a target, the people, the company, any sensitive information they can find online.
If I
Uh,
were to pause you there, by the way, that's what in the APT thing, if you're talking that, that's what the persistent part is. The
yeah,
persistent
yeah,
is they have the time and sometimes money to just keep at it for a long period. But keep
yeah.
going.
Yeah, yeah. So they have the time to build out their attacks, any custom tool sets they need to code or whatnot, and then yeah, and that's one thing, and then also the one thing that is pretty difficult to detect is defense evasion, which is one of the tactics in the MITRE framework. So defense evasion is the ability for an attacker to stay in a network and persist in a network without being seen by any security product or any blue teamer. So that's probably one of the most toughest ones too.
There's tons of techniques that can lead to defense evasion, but I think the
Yeah,
most common one, especially for once you're, there could be defense evasion for the exploit phase too, like
yeah,
fragmentation attacks that get past IPS signatures or something. But the one I think you're talking about once you're inside, the one I think of the most is generally categorized as living off the land attacks,
yeah.
meaning,
Yeah, that's one of the many ways you can do.
yeah,
That's one of the many ways. There are other ways that
yeah,
can be achieved, but that's a known one. Yeah,
yeah. And for people that I'm sure everyone knows living off the land, but like if you install malware right away, you're introducing a tool that could be detected. But living off the land attacks is at the very basic understanding is using tools that a normal person or at least administrator would use. So it's much harder to tell, hey, that PowerShell might just be an administrator doing something, but it could also be an attacker using the power of PowerShell, pun intended, to do whatever he wants on your network or she
yeah,
wants on your network.
yeah.
Cool. What's one technique from red teaming that every SOC analyst should understand? And keep getting technical. I think our audience loves to dive in, and we can over explain too.
Honestly, like I've alluded, defense evasion is the one thing that really needs
Gotcha.
to be. Um,
Is there a particular technique or thing you think of about the most that stands out as the most like a defense evasion you see? Because it could be many of them, but what is the one that is there a specific example that stands out in what you see today?
um, Yeah, honestly, I think the one that you just mentioned already, living off the land, is probably
Um,
the most common ways.
But
And
even that has many different, like
yeah,
it could be living off the land through PowerShell. It could be leveraging certutil, which is a
yeah,
normal, like it's a utility that Windows uses to check digital certificates and decode things, but attackers use it to grab things from URLs and basic. But so just know, listener, that living off the land is worth looking into, and there's a lot of techniques there. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So, whether a SOC analyst or just any cybersecurity professional, what skills should our listeners focus on right now? As far as if I'm already a cybersecurity professional, and by the way, I forgot to, but I will ask another question about defenses after. But what skills should even if I'm an IT guy doing some security role, what is a big skill I should focus on right now for cybersecurity?
Honestly, with how things are going, AI, learning how AI works, how large language models work, how are they being used in the workforce? How are companies using them, and what are the uh, evolving attack vectors are there currently? Um,
Absolutely.
so
I think like the generative AI alone is just going to be a threat enabler in that it gives threat actors more abilities. But to your point, we didn't even get into the additional attack surface that even Gen AI offers. Like it becomes an attack surface of its own with prompt injection. So things like click fix attacks like where if you think about being socially engineered, if an attacker can prompt inject a legitimate Gen AI LLM, they could get it to give you malicious responses that get you to go and look at things that could be bad. So I think
yeah,
that's fantastic advice. I would add to, I think I'm already deep into LLMs. I think you also need to look at agentic AI because that just makes the right away. Most people don't get the attack surface and the implications of just the Gen AI that they're using. Other than cool nerds like us, a few people are really diving into agentic AI. But I mean, basically, that's taking LLMs and connecting them to everything through APIs and connectors and
yeah,
giving them privileges to do things. So that just takes the threat even higher,
yeah,
and it comes down to like agentic AI is driven by MCP servers. So even at a network level, understanding MCP server privileges and how they work. So great answer. Before I ask one more question at the end, but while we're speaking of AI, how we've talked a little about this, but can you think of any other ways AI is changing both attacks and defense in your SOC world?
so you've already alluded to it. So web APIs, agentic AIs, yeah, integrating REST APIs with LLMs to automate workflows, and with as more organizations adopt that, there's going to be more opportunities to launch like more sophisticated attacks that, like you said before, that even a script kiddie or an average disgruntled person can actually go in and code their own stuff to do what God knows, goodness knows. Yeah, and
I think from the
yeah.
security side, though, this is where we kind of alluded it to before, but we have a MDR SOC. How do you like what can security do with AI to help all of this?
Yeah, without getting into specifics, like AI for any sort of SOC, if like they can be also be used to automate your security orchestration, to automate a lot of the manual stuff like threat hunting, or even like responses, or
Maybe even
using
doing correlation that helps
correlations.
detection. Like if
Yeah,
you have a
exactly.
lot of indicators that are low
Yeah,
confidence, but they somehow correlate,
yeah,
a human could definitely put those pieces together. But if they're all indicators that are hidden in tons of data,
yeah,
AI is really good
yeah,
at quickly
yeah,
finding correlations in tons of data or to
yeah,
increase
definitely.
detection even. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I do think I skipped it, but just to summarize this, at the end of the day, we don't just want to scare our audience to death. Like, we've talked about some of the common attacks, how threat landscape and threat actors are changing. So let's translate this to practical tips. So just thinking at a high level from the most common attacks we've talked about or you've seen in the SOC, what are maybe a handful or three big defensive, high return on investment take protection or defense strategies that you would want everyone to do to remain safe based on what you're seeing mostly as a SOC operator?
So patch management of legacy systems, remove.
Isn't that crazy, by the way?
Yeah,
I
that's the.
agree. I get so sick of saying MFA everywhere in patch management, but at the end of the day, yes, agree. Keep going.
Yeah. The one less common one, but I think is also as important as I kind of mentioned earlier, is IoT devices. So devices which are internet facing that almost anyone can scan. So any internet facing applications, if you must secure them, use network access controls, secure authentication methods to protect those internet facing assets. I can't, like, I've seen attacks where
Would
that's,
you
yeah,
I love it, and we agree, by the way. I will say, like, first of all, there are things you have to publicly expose everywhere, where like
yeah,
websites, so definitely
website, yeah,
harden those.
yeah,
But there's a lot of remote management and remote tools that you want your users to use. And I think just remote management and or VPN itself has kind of become a target because threat actors have learned that, okay, these companies have got good at least they're blocking Telenet and SSH and they're blocking RDP or something else. They're blocking their SQL server ports with a firewall. But there's
yeah,
people outside the company that need to get them. So they start targeting remote access. So tell me if you agree. VPN itself is a target too, but my
yeah.
recommendation is never expose remote management directly.
No, don't.
Always have it be behind VPN and
Yeah,
ZTNA, which is an even more secure way to do remote access. But more importantly, because VPN is also targeted, besides keeping your VPN products patched, you must use MFA. To me, like stolen credentials are the most easy way for an attacker to hack in, and MFA will save you from the stolen credential. So I agree with you. Anything else there?
uh the one thing is the employees are the first and last line of defense.
Of defense.
Yeah, so
I agree.
security awareness.
Cybersecurity
Yeah,
awareness. Yeah. And even
cybersecurity
monitoring.
awareness training is so important that really
Yeah.
every organization should run through, to be able to
I
identify
agree.
suspicious emails and all that. So
I don't think we'll ever fix as a society every technical flaw, but I always put it as imagine we fix every technical flaw. There's no vulnerabilities. Everyone is running a perfect technical security situation. You're still going to have a person be able to social engineer a person that has privilege into doing something they shouldn't.
yeah,
So those are great tips, Kristen. Thanks for sharing. This has been really fun for me, but before we go, just to get to know you more and for fun, let's do some really quick active responses. So
sure.
just to get to know you, when you're like in the zone, deep in an incident in the SOC, coffee, tea, or energy drinks?
Well, look what I'm drinking here, coffee.
Coffee. By the way, I love the Hello Kitty. I lived in Japan for a while. All my sisters had Hello Kitty, everything.
Yeah.
Is it Karopi? I love Karopi the frog too.
Oh yeah.
Favorite cybersecurity related media, show, book, movie, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter.
Book, the Hackers Playbook 3,
Oh,
practical
wow. So
penetration
that's
testing. Yeah.
cool. I love it. That's awesome. Are you Windows, Mac, or Linux?
Given, I don't know. I think Linux, honestly, Linux for its open source and just being able to do stuff with
Also,
it.
if you're a red teamer,
Yeah.
90% of the cool tools are
Yeah.
on some sort of Nix. I
Linux.
will say, I'm all three, but for pen testing, it's always the Linux version of Metasploit. But I tell you what, I never used Mac until about 10 years ago when they moved to Intel, and Mac became a BSD core, which is essentially a flavor of Linux. So
Oh,
if you go to command line, Mac essentially is Linux.
yeah,
So, but
it
yes, I agree with you in
is.
Linux.
Yeah.
Here's a controversial one. AI, will it save the world or end it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Honestly, it's too early to say because it's still developing.
I I think it has the potential for both. I think it's in our
Yeah.
hands, and hopefully we'll make the right choice to
Yeah, exactly.
use it to innovate, but also put some
Yeah.
safeguards on it because it's
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree.
Is there a overrated security tool out there?
Honestly, nothing is overrated if you implement it properly.
Oh,
Yeah.
how about a overrated, let's say pen testing or script kiddie tool?
Oh, man.
What was the
Uh,
DDoS one? The one that was low
oh,
orbital something or other?
yeah,
That I always thought that was a crappy tool. Like
yeah.
it would not DDoS anything that's beyond
I
1999 in
remember,
my
yeah.
uh,
I remember that one.
okay, if you know, you know, red, blue, or blue pill.
Ugh, honestly, for me, red.
That's cool. Me too. I know that means I have to face the truth of reality, but I like facts. I don't want to live in a pretend.
Yeah, exactly.
Ignore the man behind the curtain who's a hacker.
Yeah.
One habit that makes a great SOC analyst?
Think like how an attacker would,
Oh,
honestly.
that yeah, absolutely. And that's why you red team. You have to know, you have to think outside the box. Otherwise, you're going to miss stuff. This is for the nerdy folks that are probably in our industry more, but Metasploit, Cobalt Strike, or Core Impact.
Honestly, I would love to use Cobalt Strike, but with my experience,
Expensive.
Metasploit.
Yeah. It started free. I mean, I know you have to pay for it now, but I love HD more. I've watched that tool develop from Perl to Ruby to now. I'm with you. I like you. I wanted to use Cobalt Strike, but it's pretty expensive. Is there anything we missed today that our audience should know?
No, I think we covered everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure having you, Chris, and I hope you had fun too.
Yeah, well, thank you for having a discussion with me. That was great. Thank you.
Awesome. So, hey everyone, thanks again for listening. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions on today's topics or anything else, reach out to us on Blue Sky. I'm at SegAdept. And if you want to find Mark, he is at itsmark.me. And both of us are on Instagram at WatchGuard_technologies. Thanks again for listening, and you will hear from us next week.